Hey there, trippers. Welcome to another installment of Tripping Through Transformation. I'm trying not to stumble over my lips as I talk really, really fast. So I'm going to try to slow things down for not just for you guys, but for myself as well. Here, my mind is working a lot faster than my lips can move. So let's slow things down. Welcome back for another installment of Tripping Through Transformation. I'm Guillaume Poirier, and we're on to episode 17. Today I've got for you guys Adam Kozoletti. Adam is the co-founder of Enta Solutions. I guess you could say he's a consultant who helps businesses cultivate their workplace culture. Maybe he explains it a little bit in this segment. You'll have to stick around and find out for yourself. Adam is also the host of Veritas Meditative Adventures. So Adam and I are going to talk about workplace culture, meditation, and we're also going to share some stories on mental health, some personal challenges we each faced and how we overcame them. Today, my plan is to give you all 5 segments, right? That's the format of the show that I'm kind of working towards achieving. So Adam's going to be our first segment. It's going to be the professional. And then we're going to follow that up with a personal story. So people segment, personal story of something that I was struggling with for the last couple of weeks. Follow that up with a practice that I've been taught to help cope with the situation that I was faced with. And then we're going to follow that up with a place. So a location that I had the opportunity to visit to get some R&R, disconnect from social media and just distance myself socially a little bit, just slow things down, live in the moment, and just live the simpler life. So I'm going to share that location with you guys. We're going to wrap things up with my segment on psychedelics. And I guess really wrapping things up with my closing video. That's the real wrap up. So I'm going to share with you a story that Arthur Brooks shared on the impact theory. So stick around for all that. And balance, drop the beat, man.
Balance makes it bang.
Adam, thank you for joining me on Tripping Through Transformation.
I'm super excited to be here, Guy. This is going to be amazing.
Yeah, man, this has been a while coming. Like I said, like I was telling you before we started recording, I know you primarily through our network of men that's focused on men's mental health and suicide prevention, but I also know you through your show, Veritas. And I'm eager to dive into that. But I also want to talk about, your business. You're the co-founder of Enta Solutions. So I understand that's based around workplace culture and things like that.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's like mental health for businesses.
Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah. And then I see you have a background in mechanical and aerospace engineering. So I really want to dig into your whole journey, like how you went from that into co-founding your own business and then having a meditative adventure show.
Okay. Yeah. It's windy road for sure. As you said, I come from the world of engineering, like giant mega engineering consulting. So worked in the defense industry for a while before finding my way into oil and gas and then later construction. But I think along the way, one of the bigger kind of learnings for me that straight out of school, I was really focused on, like, I want to work on cool stuff, right? That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And, I did work on some cool stuff, at least by my own definition. But along the way, I realized it doesn't really matter what you're doing as long as the people you're doing it with are awesome and, you're really enjoying that connection and that growth with as part of, a team, then it's great. So, the idea of design, although I went to school for all that kind of stuff, I'm kind of one of those strange engineers that is actually really pretty good with people. So I kind of shifted into, I guess, what I would call people engineering.
Yeah. So you saw a need for that through your own experience in the jobs you were working, or is that just kind of something you found passion in?
Both definitely, came out of my experience in large organizations and seeing what happens, when there's layoffs or when things of that nature, when engagement's really low and the culture's really kind of struggling. Enta Solutions was born out of the idea that we asked ourselves the question, how come when someone starts a business or a not-for-profit or whatever it is, that they are super excited, and it's 3 people in their garage and they're so engaged, and they're they're thinking about it all the time, and all this energy and creativity, and it's just you move mountains with few resources, right? And then you become successful and you grow and you get an office and you get 10 people, 50 people, 100 people. Somewhere along the way, you start to look a little bit like everybody else, and you have turnover issues, and people quit because they don't like their boss and stuff like that. And no founder ever starts a business saying, I want to be like everyone else. They always say, I want to do something different. I want to create a place that people love to come to. And then, so where does that get diluted? Where between here and here does that happen? And that's my business partner, Caitlin, and I had this idea that, well, could you not scale a business and keep that intense level of excitement and energy? We're like, yeah, I think you could, but it would take more energy. You'd have to be thoughtful about it. And you'd have to just be, very careful with how you do things. If you're doing something boring, like writing a procedure, well, make it colorful, make a video to go with it, put your values in it, like harder, more work, more thought, but can be done. So that's.
So what came up for me is you were talking, when you start up a business, everybody's really excited. And as you grow, that seems to kind of die down. You kind of become like everybody else, like you said. Do you think it's just because when you first start up, everybody's kind of on the same page? They all have like a vision in mind, common goal, the excitement's there. And then as you grow, you're bringing on people that haven't been there from the start. So maybe they're not as invested in the vision as the original founders. Like, where do you think that disconnect happens, where people kind of start to drift?
Yeah, I think you got it exactly right. At some point, you, the founder, are not involved in hiring somebody. So somebody starts and you've never met them before. Right. So every single person that joins your company has their slightly own take on what the culture is and what the vibe is, right? It's kind of like, it's hard to put into words. So then when they go and then they hire someone, it gets diluted every single time, that kind of thing. So that's why you got to define things like your values and your mission and your vision, because you got to say, like, exactly, this is exactly what it means for us to be accountable, or to be creative, or to be innovative, or those common ones that are used, right? It's not a dictionary version, it's this, right?
Would you say like that one of the main aspects of keeping a business or thriving, or kind of like keeping everybody on the same page, would be through your hiring selection, or just to make sure that the people you bring on, you make them feel welcome, you integrate them into your business?
Well, we like to say, like, every interaction you have someone is an opportunity to kind of showcase who you are and reinforce your culture or not. Yeah. And that starts from the way your job ad looks, right? Is it just text? Is it like kind of boring? Or did you make it, did you put your values in it? Did you put your logo on? Did you put your personality into it? And, maybe you're a legal firm and your personality is very, straight faced, so be it, right? But maybe you're a marketer and it's super creative, like,
or you're tripping through transformation. You got
exactly right. Exactly right. Like, you and I are like, all right, let's create a business. Let's do something. We probably do something kind of trippy, something kind of cool, right? Yeah. And then at the interview, what's that experience like, right? When someone comes to meet you, or you do it virtually or whatever. So like everything along the way, is it curated to reinforce, this is who we are, this is what we love about it. And if you love that, then and you have the skills and we like you and all that kind of stuff, come aboard. But if like you're like, whoa, you guys are a bit much, like I don't need to be tripping through transformation, right? Then you're like, okay, cool. Like, you seemed like you had the skills, but you weren't the right fit, and we're better off just being acquaintances or whatever, right?
Do you find that most of your clients come from you approaching them saying, hey, I think I can help you? Or do you feel that a business tends to find there's an issue within their own, framework, and they come to you for guidance? Like, which happens first? Oh, we have a problem, or hey, I can prevent the problem?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's a little bit of both, I think. On the one hand, when businesses are seeking out people like me, it's often because they got their hands bit. They got dinged with something, right? Maybe they got audited. Maybe they lost a big project. Maybe they lost a client. Maybe they lost their best guy or girl. Like, something happened that they're like, oh man, I really got to do something about this, right? And then maybe they know me, or maybe they've been introduced or seen us online or whatever. And then we kind of figure out how to go about the other one, which is, a little more creative. I think that usually happens the other way, is where we reach out to somebody and we'll say something like, hey, we see your company. You guys are exactly the type of people we'd like to work with. Like, your culture is amazing, whatever, but like, do you want to do something super cool for like a team building and take it to 11? Like, do you want us to bring like musicians in or play Dungeons and Dragons, or like, let's do something super awesome. And those are the guys that are like, oh yeah, like perfect. Right? They're always looking to level up,
Yeah. Would you? So I don't know. For me personally, I feel that having that strong culture where everybody can get along and work together and be productive, it's really important because it kind of pushes you forward. I've worked for various sizes of businesses, small and large, and when you go to work and everybody's disgruntled, or they're always complaining about management, or management's complaining about the workers, it's kind of a toxic place to be. So I guess my question is, um, you know, how important is it to the success of a business to have that culture, to have that rapport between the staff members, management, whatever, to the success of the business?
Well, I think, what we're saying is it is, there's a lot of important things you need to do in your business, right? Like, you got to be strategic. You need to have IT, you need to have accounting, you need to have all this kind of stuff. What we're saying is culture is important enough to have its own discipline. And without it, all the rest kind of falls down. So arguably it is the most important thing that you could do. Because if you have good people that are excited to be there, that are interested and are excited and, thinking about it on their drive home and all that kind of stuff, there's no problem you can't solve. No process you can't build, right? No new clients you can't go find. Like, so I think this is kind of the new way of thinking, is that, when we say culture, what does that really mean, right? For it to be beneficial for a business, it has to be higher productivity, lower turnover. Those are the two ways that we can help the bottom line, right? So, do you want someone that's kind of coming into work and kind of phoning it in and not too interested or whatever? Or do you want someone that comes in and is like doing their job and then super excited, and then they notice that the coffee in the kitchen sucks, so they're like, oh man, I know a coffee guy, I'm gonna phone him up, and so they get the coffee fixed, right? And then it's not their job, but they're like, hey, you know what, I noticed all this garbage on the floor, I'm just gonna tidy this up here, whatever, right? You want people that aren't gonna walk past mediocrity.
Yeah.
They don't let it exist anywhere in their world. That's the kind of person you want, because it's that space in between job descriptions is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
That's when we're saying, if you're not emotionally connected, you're not going to go there. You're not going to look there. Right?
So I love that you bring that up, because that kind of leads me to my next point. I've worked for big companies that want to establish a culture. They have the banners promoting, collaboration and safety and productivity and quality and things like that. But having banners and slogans and things that promote these things are nice, but if you don't have the people that live it or enforce it, then it kind of means nothing. And I know I've left jobs because I was thinking, well, you guys talk a big talk, but you don't walk the walk. So I don't feel like you guys are true to your word. So again, it goes back to, it's nice to want to establish a culture, but you have to have the people that promote it as well. So again, it's kind of like, how do you go about doing that? Is it hiring the right people, or is it just bringing the people into your culture and encouraging them to have a voice? And
well, we like to say it's not the wall's job to reinforce who we are.
right.
You can put your values on the wall, but you're right. Like, especially the leadership or the founder, if they're not gonna back it up and do what they say and say what they do, and it's all easy when things are going well, right? It's party time, everything's amazing. But like when things get tricky, like if you have a client that you're like, they're doing some shady stuff, but they pay us a ton of money. What am I going to do here? Right? We say that honesty is our number one thing, but we can see that they're being dishonest or not quite honest. So am I going to fire them, or what am I going to do? Right? Or I don't know, times are tough. Like we might need to lay people off. How are we going to go about this? What are we going to do? We say that have open communication here. Are we going to be fully transparent with the staff and be like, hey guys, layoffs are on the table. Do you have any ideas on how we can what can we do here? Right. Or are you just going to quietly make a decision and then walk someone out the door? Like, it always feels like, sometimes it feels like you have no options, but you do. And if you have your values and you know what they are, like that's when it becomes important.
So if a business goes to you, they go to Antenna and they say, hey, we have a culture issue in our workplace, what's the first thing you do to address that situation? Like, how do you go into that?
Well, I think this is kind of where we differentiate from, your typical management consultant that does, business improvement or all that kind of stuff, because we do that. But we're pretty good. We say team building and we say fun things. We talked about the Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, but creating an emotional resonance, right? Things aren't going to change unless people have the desire to change, and they're not going to have the desire unless their kind of thoughts and beliefs are resonating with some kind of emotion. They want to feel a certain way, right? People want to feel valued. They want to feel supported. That's how they want to feel when they go to work. So maybe you're having a problem with, I don't know, your project management, let's say, right? We get everybody together and we do a workshop around that, and we do some personal kind of vulnerable type stuff. And then we gradually lead into the more actionable type thing. So we kind of create kind of an emotional safe space where people choose to start sharing stuff that's maybe outside of work. And then that leads to talk about work eventually. But now, you and I have been in that space, and now we're more open to like say our honest opinion or question or be creative, right? So now we've created kind of an emotional space that we can now launch that energy into something productive. And then we get into like process building or building training or whatever it is that you got to do. But there's a reason why people have offsites. They go for 3 days and they go to like a fancy hotel or something. And then they come back all pumped up and energized. Oh man, we're going to change the world. We got this beautiful vision. It's going to be great. Yeah. And what happens? 2 weeks later, the whirlwind takes over. The energy dissipates and is gone. And then 6 months later, you haven't done, 3/4 of the things you said you were going to do. So without linking that emotional excitement to something actually productive and keeping that process going, then you're not going to see those long-term benefits. Right?
Yeah. You mentioned, getting people to open up and talk about things. So when you work with another business, are you working alongside their workers and kind of integrating yourself into their day-to-day, or like, how are you building that trust where people actually want to start opening up to you?
Yes and no. Like, usually we're not sitting there every day. We're there like periodically.
Yeah.
But it's more important that people open up to each other in the office. They're the ones that are doing the work and invested in the success of that company, right? Yeah. We as the third party, of course, we connect and we create relationships and all that kind of stuff. But one thing that a third party is able to do is create a safe space. Because let's say in a team, especially with leadership, we see this a lot. There's like passive aggressiveness going on, or politics, or like competing priorities, or things of that nature. So we come in and all of a sudden we're able to create this safe space where people can like speak up and actually collaborate without giving up, some of that other ground that they have, or feeling like they're, losing face or something like that.
Yeah. But it's typically, not a one-time deal. It's something that takes time, and you work alongside a business for weeks, months.
Oh yeah. Like if we had a company come to us and be like, listen, we want that, Gallup says that a company with a strong culture can be 65% more profitable. We want that. We'd be like, well, okay, well, what are you doing for the next 3 years? Right. So it depends how big you are, but like, this takes time. This takes months and months of like slowly moving the needle and building improvement programs and making people feel heard, right? Earning trust. And, some people will leave and then you'll get some new people. Like, it's a process. It's definitely not an overnight thing. You might be able to solve a symptom in like a week or a month or whatever.
Yeah.
But, changing the way people think and their behaviors and their attitudes, that takes time for sure.
So seems like there could be several issues when you go into a business. Like, it's not one problem. So do you have different specialists or different people that specialize in different areas that can assist with specific issues?
Yeah, like I can't be an expert in everything, and neither can the people on my team. So there's a lot of specialists out there that are really, really good at their niche. So safety is a great example, right? Or quality or environmental or, accounting or whatever. So in those instances, we'll just reach out to people that we have and say, hey, we've got this project. We need you to kind of own this piece of it. And we kind of bring them on board as the expert, right? And we just kind of own the relationship and make sure that emotional flavors stays really intense, because sometimes experts in their field are really, really, really good in their field, but that emotional piece, that's what we bring.
Okay. Yeah. I don't want to, well, maybe we will kind of navigate towards Veritas, but I wanted to say, because, I was watching one of your Enta Solution videos and I recognized Arten in there, because I know Arten is also in one of your Veritas series.
Oh, really?
So I kind of saw the link now between Enta Solution and Veritas. I'm like, okay, so did Veritas come as like something for your own business to help people come together? Was that like a side project, or was that something totally separate?
It's a personal project that has, it definitely has connections with Enta. As you said, Arten, he's our videographer. So he was my first guest.
Yeah.
Right. So in the first episodes, I was like, oh, Arten, you should come on. Let's try this out. And he was like really introspective. And if you watch those episodes, he actually predicts the end of the story before I even tell it to him. So
Arten helps me make sense of stuff, because like I said, sometimes I struggle with retention of the stories, but he lays it out so well. So this was a personal project of yours that you wanted to do, and you kind of just thought to yourself, well, I know a guy who's good behind a camera. So
yeah, like the long and the short of it is when I was younger, like 10, 11, 12, I played a lot of sports and I was super competitive. Just I had this like intensity to just win and compete. And I kind of didn't know how to channel that when I was in competitive situations. So I ended up in martial arts, and that was really, really helpful for me in kind of learning how to channel this kind of a competitive intensity, this sort of beast that would come out. And so I learned Muay Thai, and I competed in Muay Thai for years and years and years and years, and then eventually ended up teaching it. And then what happened is one day my hip stopped working. All of a sudden I was like 28 and I was like walking funny. Looked like I was 80 years old. So I went and I had, checked out and x-rays and all this kind of stuff. Turns out I had impingements on my hips, which are basically growths on the femur, so that the range of motion is restricted. But what it also does is it carves out all the cartilage 40 years faster than it should. So that's why I was walking like an 8-year-old. I had the hips of an 8-year-old at 28. So physically devastating, because as someone who enjoys physical activity and martial arts and kind of like, crazy balancing type stuff, what am I going to do? So didn't want to do surgery because I was so young. So I basically found a guy that was just as crazy as I am, and he kind of built me a physio strengthening program, and I basically did it like religiously, week to week to week to week to week. And after 18 months, I was almost back to 100%, despite having all these ailments, which you can't fix, right? It's arthritis is arthritis. So
Yeah.
I ended up putting off surgery for 8 years. And in that time, I had gradually sort of increasing chronic pain. Like every time I stepped, right, my leg hurt.
Yeah.
And, there's a certain amount of mental, mental health comes into that a little bit because it kind of wears you down. It wears you down.
Yeah.
So I was curious about meditation, and I started learning about meditation and all this kind of stuff. And then, ended up starting my business, and all this kind of happened at once. And then finally got to the point where my leg, I couldn't even walk my dog. I couldn't walk 50 meters without being in considerable pain. So I wanted to make it to 10 years, but I made it to 8.
Yeah.
So I call in January of 2020, I call the surgeon's office and I'm all right, put me on the list. So okay, you're on the list. It's going to be like a year. So cool. And then in March, 5 days before all the lockdowns started here, I was at the gym and, just doing my thing, and my right Achilles exploded. Down I went. And if you've ever heard or been around someone that happens, it sounds like a floorboard snapping. Like it's brutal.
Yeah.
Like I thought a heavy bag had fallen and hit me. That's what it felt like. And but it, my dad went through that. My brother went through it, and I knew the second I turned around, there's no one there. I was like, oh, I know what this is.
So is this all like sports related, all these injuries, or like you just not having any luck?
Yeah, well,
or both?
Turns out it all started. I had undiagnosed hip dysplasia as a baby.
Okay.
And that's what is really the root cause. But the Achilles snapping was because the hips were all messed up and things were out of balance.
Okay.
But, you're in a cast for 3 months. So I go in a cast, and 5 days later, the lockdown started. And then, our business lost everything. So now my business is dead. I'm in a cast for 3 months. This is not a good time for me. So fast forward, I get out of the cast. We managed to salvage the business and kind of start to see some success. And then October of that same year, I just out of the cast from the Achilles, the phone rings and they're like, "Hey, Adam, good news. We got a date for you. We're going to replace your hip." I was like, oh my God. Okay. Amazing. So yeah, I go back, I get my hip replaced, and now I'm on crutches again for 3 months. So and I finally recovered from that. And now it's, the lockdown, the gyms are closed. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to do tons of physio. I'm going to be so regimented about my physical health that when it's time to come back, I'm going to hit the ground running. So I spend 4 or 5 months doing physio programs, strength training, anything I could. The gyms open up. I'm all excited. I go back in my 3rd day. What am I doing? The exact same thing I was doing before. My other Achilles exploded. Same thing. Bam. And I'm like, I survived the first one. I got through the surgery. I went through all that chronic pain by being mentally tough. But that 3rd one snapped. And even when I think about it, it's not I don't remember the pain being in my leg. I remember it here. It's like my soul died.
Yeah.
And so back in cast again for 3 months and recovered. But I spent the next 12 months just kind of in this funk. And the worst part was I didn't know. Other people noticed, but I thought I was just going about my day normally. But I was hollow inside. I was emotionally disconnected. It was I was just a shell of a person powering through. And through some of the meditation I had been learning along the way, this really helped me. It helped me kind of reconnect, and I started telling stories, and I started experimenting with that kind of stuff, and that kind of creativity and that storytelling and meditation eventually snapped me out of it. And I was like, wow, one day, literally I was looking in the mirror and I just kind of woke up and shook my head, and I was like, wow, what have I been doing the last 12 months? And it was this kind of profound moment that, I had gone through kind of physical pain, intellectual pain of kind of recovery, and then this emotional pain, which is by far the hardest. And then I ended up kind of where it was. Yeah. So Veritas, that's kind of a long way of saying that Veritas came out of, me wanting to do something. I had this kind of newfound love of storytelling that had come from meditation, and it was healing for me. And I just had this intense desire to share that with the world in a creative way. And then through my business, I had access to video people who had the skills to help me do that. And so the idea was born that I could create a kind of a storytelling / podcast through Veritas. And that's the story, basically.
So you had no, like you didn't meditate or anything like that prior to this? This is like of a new thing for you, newer thing?
Yeah, like I started playing around with it, I would say, like 2019, again, just before the pandemic. So like through all that stuff I went through, I was, I met a friend that was teaching me. We'd meet every couple of weeks and he'd kind of teach me, and I just kept going with it. So I had someone kind of like coaching me and pushing me. Yeah. And I reached a point where I was like, I had stories I wanted to tell, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I guess we touched a little bit about your mental health because you were struggling with all these different injuries. Did you find it hard to get into meditating? Or because I know, like for me personally, my story is a little different than yours, but it still resonates in that, for me, I felt like I achieved something and then I lose it. I achieve something and I lose it. Like I feel like no matter what, I'm always falling back. And I feel like it's kind of similar to you where, you got the hip injury, then you got the Achilles. And then you get that fixed, and then the other one snaps, and it's kind of like no matter what, you're always falling backwards. So did you find it hard to make meditation part of your routine? Because I struggle with it. I know it's important, but I struggle to make it a priority.
Yeah, I think that's why for me, having somebody like push me and like coach me, like that was my answer to that problem. Because 100%, I got so much going on in my life. I got 3 kids, a crazy dog, a business, like as if I have, even if I had 15 minutes, never mind half an hour or longer, but like, let's say I had 15 minutes to just sit quietly. It would take me half an hour just to like calm down to a point where, I was in a meditative space or whatever. So, my solution to that was I met someone that I kind of met with regularly and kind of forced me to create that space, right? It's kind of like having a buddy you go to the gym with or something, right?
Yeah, I think having that is important. That's why I reach out to so many coaches. As much as I want to tell myself that I have the determination to do anything on my own, it does help to have that support. Mm-hmm. So when you craft your adventure stories, your meditative adventure stories, how do you come up with the concepts? Because I know, like Mars, to me, it kind of talks about overcoming challenges. There's all these different, I don't want to kind of give it all away because you got the storm and the dragons and the stone scorpion. And then at the end, you have this reflection that maybe you manifested those, or those are versions of you. Like, I don't really know how to kind of package it, but by the end of it, you kind of realize, hey, I'm bigger than what I am now. And you have like this potential to become greater than yourself. So how do you develop these stories? I know you mentioned a song, I think Conquer River or something like that. So how do you come up with the stories? Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of them are born out of kind of the pain I had in my own journey, right? And, with pain and like you said, like this happened and then this happened and this happened. For me, when I look back, I needed all of those things to happen in a cascading series of events to like push me to the point of breaking, because that's what eventually led to me growing in my case, kind of a creative space, an emotional space, all this kind of stuff. So looking back, I'm actually very grateful for it because it pushed me to grow as a person. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these stories come from my own reflections, my own discussions around like philosophy and, things like that, and then placed in kind of the form of a metaphor, right? So this Mars one, things like astrology or planets or energy or whatever seem like as good as metaphor to base something around. I need inspiration from somewhere. So the idea of just kind of like that intense, like fight or flight, just act, don't think, right? Run, fight, And then this epiphany at the end that actually I'm stronger than I think I am. I'm more powerful than I think I am. These things that I'm running from, actually they should be running from me. Like this, that's where that one kind of came from. And then lots of times I have this like idea of like a theme or something. And then the music. So this song Conquer, which is by a band called Rivers. It's kind of this intense song about like conquering, overcoming obstacles and that kind of stuff. I'll like exercise to it. I'll play it. And I find when I exercise, that space is very meditative to me, especially like cardio. Like I get my heart rate super high up, and then I listen to the music, and it just kind of really feeds that emotion that I'm looking to provide in the story. And then I start kind of coming up with images or things like that, right? Images of someone climbing and hanging there, and then someone on the line in the dirt, and I'm like, okay, how can I link them together? So there's it's kind of my process, right? I don't just sit down and write. I have to, decide on the emotion and the theme and like what I want to provoke, and then get myself in a space where I'm like feeling those things, and then out it comes.
What I liked from your series on Mars, after listening to it, I was reminded of my own journey in that, when I was younger, I had all these aspirations of who I could become, and there's nothing stopping me. Like I felt anything was achievable. Then life happens, you start making choices, and maybe you shelve some of your dreams. And after I listened to the last episode, the story on Mars, where, by the end, your character, he grows the wings and he sees all the potential in him. It reminded me like, holy crap, I still have that belief in me. I got to remember to bring it back, because anything is possible. So that's kind of what I got out of that. I'm really interested to listen to the other series, because I know you've got some on elementals, and I think Pluto, right?
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of them on now. There's like 20 episodes or something, and each story is like 4 or 5 episodes long. But yeah, like the elementals one's fun. I was playing around with some choose your own adventure type stuff. So you're given a choice at the end of the first episode, like where do you want to go next? And you choose the next episode based on what you choose, and then so on and so forth. So what does it mean?
Those books from when I was younger, those choose your own adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And then at the end, like, what does that mean? Well, I chose fire first, and then water, and then air, and then earth, like, or I got earth first or whatever. But like, that's an interesting reflection. Like, what was it about the intensity of fire that called to you that you're like, no, I want to hear the fire story? Or like the soothing flowing of water, where was that your first inclination? I'm like, that's an interesting reflection, right? Like, that's the idea, is if you can imagine, sometimes what happens to you in life is just so intense and so brutal that you just kind of feel beat down, and you kind of can't get out of your funk, right?
Like,
kind of like
I can relate to that. Yeah.
Right. And then I thought, well, if I could tell a story where you're imagining yourself and you're the hero of the story, that's pretty harmless, and you can kind of lose yourself in the story. And if I make it really visual, it is kind of meditative, where you're thinking about what it smells like, what you see, like what it feels like, all that stuff. And at the end, if there's a bit of an epiphany, and you go and you finish that, and you realize like, oh my God, like you have a bit of like you said, you were able to relate it to your own life. And in doing so, if you could find like that tiny kernel of courage that you didn't have before to keep going, or to find a new perspective, then the story worked, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I struggle to initially is that when I was listening to the story, I'm really trying to understand, okay, what is he telling me, or what does he want me to get? But once I stopped focusing on that, and I just allowed myself to just kind of gain my own perspective from the story and just let it be my own thing, then it kind of became easier to get lost into it, and to get the value out of it. So one of the things that you mentioned, though, like with choose your own story and the perspective that you get, what I find interesting is at the end of each story, you draw a card. You do, like, I don't know if it's tarot cards or what, but
the animal cards. Yeah.
So I from my understanding, you do that to kind of give this to see the story through a new lens or something like that. Like, can you tell me more about that? Because I think
so the way the show works is I invite a guest. We come into the studio. They sit there, they close their eyes, and I read them the story. So they've never heard it before. And they're
Right.
like, okay, here's part one. And then immediately after, we have a conversation about it, just like we're having now. But to start that off, you draw a card. And
Mm.
in this deck, there's like a bunch of animals, and there's a little book that says, oh, well, the owl represents this, or the dog represents this, or whatever. And it's kind of a fun way to like, gives you a perspective to think about. Oh, yeah, cool. Like something about like wisdom and thoughtfulness came up. And then we start talking about the episode, and inevitably that person will start thinking about the episode through that lens to which they were just given, which is like slightly different than their own just natural lens. So it's kind of a fun way to do it. And by doing so, you go through the story, you're like, wow, how cool is it that I chose this owl that represents wisdom when the theme of the story was like learning wisdom? Like, that's pretty fun. So maybe you make a connection that you might not otherwise have, right? So
Yeah, what I'm kind of getting is, you listen to the story and you kind of go through it through your own mind, but then you draw this card and it kind of expands your perspective. Like, oh, yeah, from I don't know, I've seen you draw like the owl and I think the deer and stuff like that. So each animal kind of gives its own thing. So yeah, it kind of just expands on your view of the story and makes you think differently, right?
yeah, it's kind of a fun idea. Here's what I think, but through the eyes of a dog that's very loyal and very, how does that look different? I don't know. That's the point. Let's just talk about it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And you also begin every show with breath work. So is that kind of just to help the listener ease into the story? Or like,
Yeah, like you said, you found it easier to listen to when you kind of put aside your own expectations or your own sort of um, thoughts or
narratives, my own narratives, really. Yeah.
yeah. So the breath work is just like a quick prompt to hopefully you just even take one deep breath and just kind of like let go of whatever's shaking around your head and just listen to a story for 10 minutes. Like just empty your space and get in the right mindset, because it does help even if you just take a breath and just relax physically, like your shoulders or your chest or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. So do you find personally benefit from doing these stories, or are you mostly doing them for other people?
I 100% benefit from that creative process we talked about, right? I reflect on these types of things, right? Like I'm like, I've just found a new perspective on something. I just read this book and it gave me a really interesting perspective that now I can apply on my own life, right? Because your spiritual emotional journey is never done. You just keep thinking about stuff in a different ways or different lenses or whatever. So I think about it, I ponder it, and then if I can craft a story around it that just kind of cements it in my own mind, and then sharing it is cathartic as well, because like why I went through all that pain and struggle, and in doing so kind of grew spiritually, let's say, in some way, and discovered this love of storytelling and creativity. Why would I keep that to myself? Why not give it away?
Yeah.
Like there's other people struggling out there. Maybe it helps you, right? That's, I think, the one of the epiphanies that I had along this journey is that, like, that's great. You find your potential, or you start to become the person that you could be.
Yeah.
But what difference does it make if you're not doing something to give it to the world in some way?
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate you sharing those stories with us, because I know working on meditation is something that I've been struggling with. It's something I'm trying to incorporate into my life. And initially, I thought to myself, "Oh, meditative adventures, I'll give it a shot." And I mean, initially, I struggled. Like I told you, I struggled with men's voices. I think it's because of my past relationship with men. So I felt it was difficult for me to be vulnerable to a man's voice, right? So that was like a self-discovery, and that might not have been the intention why you put the show out, but I still gained something from it. And now, like, I discovered that, I'm like, okay, well, I'll be intentional about listening to men's voices. So I started to listen to your episodes more and more, and from that, now I feel like I'm actually getting more benefits from it, because I'm getting the story and I'm being more insightful. And so for me, my biggest thing was, at first I was scared that I wasn't doing it right. Oh, this is not the intended purpose of this. And so it kind of, that was a block for me. But then just being consistent and going back, I've actually, I'm getting a lot of benefits from your story. So thank you for that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's the obstacle is the way, right? Like it's that
Just like the book right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that for me, that was a big fear, is like I have this perfectionism thing, and I'm like, okay, well, if something's presented to me, I have to do it right. I have to do it how it's intended to be used. But why? If I found unintended benefits to your stories, then why not make the most of it? Why beat myself up? Oh, well, it's not why you put the show out. Well, who cares? I got benefits, right? So
that's so cool to hear you say that. I got goosebumps, because from my perspective, like recording them and putting them out there is the most terrifying thing in the world. Like,
oh, just like me doing this show right now. Yeah. 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's hard to put yourself out there and sharing things that you're passionate about, and seeing if, other people, it's going to resonate with others and things like that, like this show. But no, I 100% appreciate you doing that. And I love that you shared a little bit about your mental health story. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to share, because it sounds like you've gone through a lot of injuries. And is there anything else you struggle with that you've overcome? And
no, I think the biggest thing I learned from that, and like maybe one of the mistakes I made along the way, was carrying that burden myself.
Yeah.
And not inviting the ones that I love and that are closest to me to be a part of that journey. I was very just like, I'm going to be just a tough guy and power through. And, then when I started playing with some of this, spiritualities type stuff, I felt very vulnerable at that. And that fear kept me from, sharing that with my wife, for example, or my parents or my brother or my sister or whatever. So I think for me, looking back, I wish I had started to share that with them sooner and been more open and honest about what's going on in my head and how I'm feeling and all that kind of stuff. So, I think that, if there's one thing that I, one piece of advice I'd give people that are, going through stuff or struggling or whatever, is to don't power it alone. There are people that care for you that, even if you just need them to listen, so.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's why it's so great that we have that network, that we do, where guys can reach out. I know for me, sharing my burden, I mean, I personally don't have many people to share with. It's where I'm living in Creston. It's just me and my daughters, right? I'm relatively new. So I have friends, but they're not long-term friends that I can really pour my heart out to. So sometimes I feel like I have to kind of hold that burden, because I'm not going to dump on my kids and burden them. You know what I mean? So finding a group of guys, anybody that you can talk to, definitely helps. And yeah, like you talking about your spiritual journey, in a sense, it sounds like you had to open up about it because it was kind of something new to you. Maybe you didn't feel comfortable sharing at some point.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's still, I think I haven't figured it all out myself either. So when I'm talking about it or whatever, it's like I'm thinking out loud a little bit, right? Like I'm still in the process of going through this, right? But I've enjoyed it, right? I think of it like, I always think it feels to me like shining a flashlight in a dark cave where you can kind of like see this much at a time, right?
Yeah.
And as you kind of grow as a person and go through struggle and overcome it and all that kind of stuff, maybe the flashlight beam like gets a little bigger and you can move it around and see a little bit more, or understand yourself a little bit better. But to me, that's what's so fascinating about the whole process is just like, wow, what's next?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think that's why I find that meditation does have value, even though I struggle with it, because when I am able to find those quiet moments and kind of reflect on myself, that's when I have those epiphanies, those aha moments, those, oh, I could have done better, or, oh, I should do this differently, or, you know what I mean? It kind of helps me navigate. But also meditation and spirituality is all relatively new to me as well. For the most part, most of my life, I thought it was just kind of like, oh, it's witchcraft, it's hogwash, it's whatever, it's nothing serious. So for now that I'm opening my mind up to it, it's hard to talk about it because I feel part of me kind of feels like I'm talking contrary to what I believe. Like I still haven't fully bought into it yet, but I'm
Mhm.
working towards it. So it's an interesting journey.
Yeah, I 100% sympathize. Like I grew up, my mom was a doctor, my dad was an engineer, and we were very sort of logic and science sort of ruled, So I mean, the word meditation, I probably don't never even heard it at home growing up, right? So
Yeah.
it is contrary to you know the way I was the way I was raised and the people I interacted with and all that kind of stuff, right? So it does feel very vulnerable to even come out and talk about it because yeah, I don't know, I've sort of like created this idea in my mind that it won't be accepted or something like that.
Oh yeah. For me, most of my life, I feel like people that were into spirituality were kind of seen like nut jobs. You know, I mean, that's the mindset that I've
Yeah,
had for most of my life,
totally.
and
Right.
it's not because it is. It's just that's what I came to believe. It was part of my environment. It's what I learned. But so now that you're open about spirituality and meditation, and you've got Veritas, and you've obviously got the team to put this together. Are you
Mhm.
looking at expanding this, or is it just kind of still a side project, personal project that you're doing for yourself?
Well, my ultimate vision is I had this idea for a fantasy novel,
Okay.
and I got it while meditating. I just had this like intense image pop into my head, and this story came around it. So if you listen to all of them, you'll find that there's some recurring characters and some linking points. So I'm like slowly just building scenes or pieces from what I hope to become like a future novel or series of novels. So I think the ultimate vision is if I had people that enjoyed them and followed them, then eventually if I turned it into a book that was a little more structured, they would enjoy that too, right? And then
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
also been doing some of them live, like at like events and stuff. And I'm working on like a keynote speech around this type of stuff that includes like a story piece in it. So yeah, I'm slowly injecting some energy into it and kind of seeing where it goes.
And it could probably play a part with your other business as well, right? Antenna with helping people out that way.
Yeah, well, I kind of view it as like some of this work of Veritas does for the individual what Enta is kind of trying to do for the organization, right?
Oh,
The analogy is kind of there, right? We're trying to create workspaces where people are excited to be there, and this, the benefit is that you're successful. But if you're happier at work and you're excited to be there, then what's going to happen? You're going to treat your colleagues better. You're going to go home and you might be tired, but you'll still be kind of happy. You'll treat your spouse better, your kids better, your parents better. The company will succeed more. It'll give back to the community. So, like, it's our way of trying to make the world a better place.
yeah. I think that's definitely a worthy cause. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, you're targeting the individual, the corporation. You're kind of like multi-sided attack here, trying to make
Yeah.
everybody better.
Yeah. And, I could have never dreamed this up on day one. It just kind of evolved. I certainly never would have, imagined I'd be telling a story where I was dealing with years and years of physical injuries and that kind of stuff. But that's what life came along and did what it wanted, and here I am. So
Yeah. Well, I think Antenna and Veritas both have amazing purposes. I think I really believe in what you're doing. Um, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there all the time. You
Yeah.
can check out Veritas and on Instagram. We're also on YouTube. If you search Veritas Realm on there,
Yeah.
and you can check out our website. I mean, our logo's right there. Go Google us and check us out. Reach out if you want to chat.
Yeah. Well, I think people should definitely check you out because I think they stand to benefit a lot from the services that you offer. Um, just want to thank you, Adam, for coming on. We're getting close to an hour here, so I want to be respectful of your time. But yeah, I look forward to more episodes of Veritas and learning more about myself. And I look forward to the work we're going to do together on men's mental health and suicide prevention.
I love that. Thank you so much, Key. I'm super excited that went in an hour. I know you said, hey, it's usually 20 minutes, but if it's good, we go longer. So must have been good conversation.
Yeah, man. If I have good questions, if I feel comfortable enough to make it last that long, it's a challenge for me too. I'm still getting used to, interviewing and asking the right questions, but I appreciate you coming on and giving me a shot at getting better.
Well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
All right, Adam. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Hello, welcome to Veritas. I'm your host, Adam Kozoletti, and I'm here to guide you on a meditative adventure like no other. Join me and lose yourself in your imagination as we travel the outer reaches of the cosmos, quest for powerful talismans, and explore the inner realm of your subconscious. What might you find along the way? But be warned, fair traveler, this path is not for the faint of heart. On this path, of one thing I am certain, dragons be here. Are you ready?
Welcome back, trippers. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Adam Kozoletti. You can find Adam on LinkedIn, and his show Veritas is on YouTube and Instagram. So now that you know where to find him, make sure to check him out. I told you guys that today I would give you 5 segments. So Adam's segment was, the first P, professionals. I'm going to cheat a little bit today, however, and I'm going to mix a personal segment or people segment in with practice segments because it's easier for me to just tell you my personal story as I'm explaining the practice that I use to kind of help cope through it. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys real quick here. I hope I don't get in trouble for sharing this. I'm sure it's copyrighted, but it's for educational purposes. So before I get into that, I'm going to share my story. So about 2 weeks ago, I was on social media and I found out that a nonprofit organization that I'd been working with for the last 2 years, I'd basically shut the doors. They said, we're not moving forward with the project, right? So this was, we were building an outdoor performance stage and we had built a concession, and the plan was to host bands and have, plays and poets come and maybe stand-up comedians, dance club, like just have people come and do performances locally or, provincially, internationally, who knows? Just, we wanted to have a place in town for people to kind of gather and enjoy performances. And it had been I think it was 8 years in the making with the founder, 3rd attempt at getting this off the ground. And I'd been with them for 2 years, and I found out through social media that it came to an end. So I'm going to get into the practice here. So this is the triangle of experiences, right? You can see the triangle here, and at the top is situation. So for me, the situation is finding out through social media that the nonprofit had come to an end, right? It shut the doors. First thoughts. So when I first read that, my first thought was, well, holy crap, I can't believe this is happening. Second thought was, how come they didn't give me a heads up first? Like, why am I finding through social media, right? Third thing that came through my mind was, here we go. This is another project that I invested myself into that's led to nothing, right? It just fizzled. And then from there, my thoughts just started to spiral down. I just started to get negative, and was not good. So that's my thoughts, right? Feelings. Well, I felt, I don't want to say betrayal, but I felt disappointment because I really felt like in that scenario, I would have liked to get a heads up and not find out through social media. I felt that over 2 years, I had built a strong enough relationship with the people involved that I could have, I should have received a heads up. And failure, like, again, felt like a failure just because there's another project, again, that just didn't amount to anything. So just feeling blue, feeling dumb, like in the dumps. And And then my behavior was I became irritable. I became agitated. And then I went on Facebook and I reshared the post from the organization onto my own page, basically being like, oh, this was unexpected. Here we go. Another project that I pour myself into that leads to nothing, but I'm not a quitter. Anyway, so I made like a thing about it, right? That was my reaction, my behavior. And totally made it about myself, pity is me. Here we go again. And yeah, I put that on Facebook. Uh, After a little while, I came to realize that was kind of selfish of me, and I didn't put any thought into how the other people might be feeling about the closure or what they might be going through. I made it all about myself, so I ended up deleting the post. But for the sake of the practice here, I'm explaining to you what I went through. So the situation was the organization closing. My thoughts were, holy crap, feeling of failure, and then my behavior was to repost it in kind of a shitty way, honestly. So what the triangle of experience wants to teach you is to pause, because what they want to teach you here is not to react to situation, but to respond to situation. So when you react, you're impulsive. You do the first thing that comes to mind, right? So for me, it was feeling like crap, making it about myself, going on Facebook, reposting it, and being like, I'm not a quitter. I wouldn't do this, blah, 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 blah. So that was my reaction. And then I came to realize, this is not how I want to be. This is not the person that I want to be. And I withdrew the post. But so that's what I'm saying. They're teaching you how to pause, come up with a strategy, and then respond to the situation. So this is kind of an exercise for you guys. If you find yourself in a stressful situation, it could be anything that sets you off, right? Take a minute to think about, okay, what's going through my mind? What am I feeling? And learn to respond and not react, because you'll see that your behavior might not be the best if you're just reacting. So this is kind of just like a simple overview. Like, I'm not a professional. This is still something that I'm just learning and studying. I'm a student, not a master. But I thought I'd share this with you guys. And if you want to learn coping mechanisms, I would strongly suggest that you check out Mindspace. It's only available to British Columbia residents. You do need a doctor's referral, but $65 to sign up. But then you get your money back if you attend, I think, 6 of the 8 classes. So, and then once you attend level 1, you can move on to level 2, and there's all levels that you can work on. So this is my first course that I'm taking, but I'm getting a lot of useful information from it. So I strongly suggest that you guys check out this CBT. Again, it's called Mindspace, and it's available to British Columbia residents. Cool. We got over those 2 segments. I think that went all right. The next one I want to share with you guys is place. So I want to cover places you can find healing, you can find, courage or support, information. That's kind of one of my places, right? And so for me, the place I want to share with you guys is a little retreat that I got to experience called 4 Rest Retreat. And before I share my picks, I'm going to share with you guys this quick little reel that Salmo Forest Retreat put together for you guys, or for us, I guess. Okay, so what you got here at 4 Rest Retreat, which is in Salmo. Sorry, I'm gonna share my tab. So we rented this cabin in the forest, in the mountains, totally off grid. Well, yeah, they got solar panels, but that's how you get your electricity to like charge your flashlights at night and charge your shower pump. Because you also shower outside. You get a bucket, and you hang the shower from a tree, and you got your little pump in the bucket, and that's how you shower, like outside in nature. You got to pump your own water. You got to provide your own heating. I mean, there's wood for a stove, and there's propane to cook on, but I don't know. It's to me, it was nice to just get away from daily life. You're disconnected from the world. You're disconnected from social media. And what I like the most about it is you really lived in the moment. I actually enjoyed pumping my water and chopping my wood and cooking and cleaning my dishes by hand and just going through the tasks to get me through the day, right? I think those are things that we take for granted. Everything is kind of so readily available to us day to day. And we often overlook just enjoying the simple things. So that's the cabin there. Really nice, nice little setup, really private. There I am. So there's trails there you guys can check out. Beautiful scenery. Again, I am. There's Brandy. Brandy's the one who made this possible. She did the booking and everything. She picked me up in Creston and she drove me to Salmo. She did everything. So there we are on the trail together. And then, yeah, there's where you pump your water and just out in the wild, right? And then just to sit. But yeah, this was shocking to me. So before I went there, this is my average phone, how much time I spent on my phone every day. And on Wednesday of this week in July, I was up to over 17 hours. Social media addiction is, I'll be honest, it's a real issue for me. Something I'm working on. But, the first step to working on something is realizing it's a problem. So I realized in July that it was a problem. But, I was able to trim that down to under 2 hours while I was out there. Not perfect, but, some of this was just listening to music and things like that. So anyways, all I want to say is if you're in BC, if you're in the Salmo area and you're just looking to disconnect, get back to the basics, live in the moment, I strongly suggest that you guys check out Salmo Forest Retreat. So yeah, so there's my segment on places. Let's do a quick one on psychedelics here. I'm going to share this tab with you guys. This is M.A.P.S. I always struggle with this one. Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I think that's what that stands for. I'm pretty sure I got it right by now. But here's a brief message from M.A.P.S. and Rick Dublin.
Ooh, biggest myths.
Well, there's a lot of myths.
There's a myth that psychedelics can heal and cure everything on their own.
That, if you take this pill, this drug, then you're going to be cured of all your ailments. That psychedelics are some sort of panacea that can be the answer to all of our problems or mental health issues or social ills, all these things.
There's myths that one dose is a miracle cure, and one dose means you're enlightened and you're smarter than everybody else.
The truth is the community around the work and the integration after is really the most important part.
There is no silver bullet. These experiences, these non-ordinary states, they require a lot of work and integration. In fact, like the drugs are not even the point, right? They just are they are a tool in the toolbox that can open us up to our own inner healing intelligence and to that pathway.
Right now, the biggest myth that is of concern is that the healing is in the drug. A lot of people are going to be mistaking that this is about giving somebody LSD or giving them MDMA or giving them ketamine, when actually the healing is in the therapeutic context and the support that people get, the preparation that people get, the work that they do integration afterwards.
Learning and growing and bettering ourselves through introspection, reflection, and engaging with our communities and our environment.
Right. So I love this message, that the psychedelic drug is not the cure. It's the work that you put into it after. And this is why I'm so interested in doing psychedelic therapy. It's not something that I've ever done, but it's something that's clearly on my radar. I just want to preface with, I've been anti-drug for the majority of my life. Okay, I come from a background where my family had substance abuse, and I grew up sheltered from it, thankfully. My grandmother, when she passed away, gave my mother $2,000 and said, put that towards his education. And with that, my mom put me in boarding school for 4 years. There's issues that came from that, but I feel like at the same time, it sheltered me from probably getting into those bad influences as well. So most of my life, very much against drugs. I drank alcohol when I was about 17 on and off. Still not a big drinker, but other than that, psilocybin mushrooms are the next drug or illegal drug that I've ever done. And I was, I think, 33 years old at the time. And it came at I don't want to say convenient time, or an opportune time, because not long after, my house burnt during wildfires. And then I was in court, trying to enforce the 50-50 parenting of my children. Then I was bankrupt, and then I went through separation, and I lost my job, and I had to move, and all these things kind of happened. And so I feel like it was good that I discovered psilocybin mushrooms at 33, because during my tougher times, and I'm sure I'll tell the story in greater details in some other segments, how I used pharmaceutical drugs to help me cope with depression, anxiety, and it just kind of wrecked my life. And having had those previous experiences with psychedelics, I said, hey, well, I know there's a lot of talk about it. Why don't I try to, dabble with this myself, so to speak? And so I've experienced tremendous benefits. But to get back to the point, psychedelics are not the cure. It's the work that you put into it. So for me, the biggest thing that I got from taking psilocybin mushroom was introspection. And that's something that was mentioned in the video, is being able to see past events from a different perspective, maybe putting myself in somebody else's shoes, or maybe being like an observer, kind of just hovering above the scenario and kind of just paying attention, not being engaged in it, and being able to kind of, assess the situation from a different angle. And you get a lot of, or I got a lot of, I could have done better. I should be better. This is what I can work on. This is what I can improve. But all the psychedelic does is basically give you that clarity, those visions, so to speak, those moments of realization that there's more to you. You could be better, and you can work on certain things, and improve certain things about yourself. But then if you go through your day-to-day life and you don't apply any of the things that you learned, you're not going to grow. So I love the message there by M.A.P.S that, don't put all your money into, or sorry, don't put all your hopes into just the drug is going to cure me. Just like, any pill is not a one, what's the word? I don't know what the word is. It's not the answer to all your problems. You actually have to put in some work and work on yourself. So I wanted to share that. And that brings us to the end of the show. So I want to share a video from you guys. This is a clip from Impact Theory. And it has Arthur Brooks as the guest. And I'll play the story, and then I'll share why it's so meaningful to me, and maybe you'll find some value in it as well. Oh, I got to share it first.
Book is a place that you and I both know as Pacific Northwest guys. There's a place called Lincoln City in Oregon. You're just north of Newport. And I used to go there because my aunt was the receptionist at the hotel, and she lived in a trailer near the beach, and it was like this bliss. I used to go there, and I remember the first time I was trying to fish off the rocks in Lincoln City, Oregon. I was catching nothing. This old guy who lived in a shack is watching me, and he comes up and says, "Kid, I've been watching you." Today he'd be arrested, but and I said, he said, "You're not catching anything, right?" I said, "No." He says, "Because you're doing it wrong. You can't catch any fish unless it's a falling tide. That's when the tide is going out very quickly, rushing out between the rocks." And I'm like, "Well, all the fish are gone, right?" He says, No. You'll see. It's stirring up the plankton. The fish go crazy. It's happening in 45 minutes. He has his fishing pole. We throw our lines in, and we're pulling them out by the tens. It's unbelievable. And afterward, he's feeling sort of philosophical. He lights up a cigarette on the rocks. I'm 11 or something. And he says, "Hey, kid, during a falling tide, you can only make one mistake." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Not having your line in the water." And I have learned this, that the time between the tides of your life, the falling tide of your life, looks like you're losing everything. Get your line in the water, because that's the most fertile period of your life.
So what does it mean to have your line in the water?
You must try new things. You must be fully alive. You must try everything you possibly can.
I need you to define fully alive.
To wake up each day and to live that day full of possibility. Not to nurse your wounds, not to waste your time, not to try to do things that you used to do. To be fully alive is to be alive to the new set of experiences that's coming across the transom. That's super important, because during this time of liminality, by the way, there's a lot of research on this. This is not just an anecdote about this kid fishing in Oregon. There's a lot of research that shows that this time between periods in your life, there's a guy named Bruce Feiler who writes a book about transitions, And he said during these life quakes, you know, if your spouse just left you, that's a fertile period for you to learn new things. If you've lost somebody to death, if you're going through chemotherapy, for example, this is and you're very
You've
afraid.
just been through a pandemic.
For example, if you during the pandemic, many people find that despite the fact that they hated it and were insecure and it was horrible, that their lives transformed for the good. That, in terms of what we're talking about here, the two curves, fluid and crystallized intelligence, that.
All right. What I wanted to get to you guys here is that keeping your line in the water during the falling tide. That message really resonated with me. The whole story of just kind of, you know, when things seem hopeless, that's when you kind of have to give it your best shot. That's what I get out of it. And why it feels so relatable to me is this. As I've said, I lost my home to wildfires in 2016. When that happened, I'd already had 50-50 custody of my children for 6 years at that point. But once my home was gone, the mother of my kids unilaterally decided that she wanted to move the kids like 4 or 5 hours away. And so I couldn't let that happen. So I went to court while I'd lost my home, spent a shitload of money, excuse the language. That led to, consumer proposal. It led to foreclosure of my rebuilt home. So after my house was rebuilt, I only lived in it for about 8 months, and then the bank took it, right? I went through a separation. Then I lost my job. Things kept just spiraling. I had to cash in my RSPs to pay off my SUV so that I didn't have so many monthly bills. And then I had to get rid of my SUV anyways because I filed for bankruptcy. And then just bit by bit, it was just like one thing just kept being taken away from me to the point where I felt like I had nothing left. Like anything that I identified as was gone. My job, gone. My home, gone. My finances, gone. Luckily, the one thing I was able to hold on to is my daughters. Right? I still have my kids, but I lost a lot. And there's times when I was really angry. I would have to go for long walks, smoke a joint, kind of just stare off into the distance, and try to just not even process, just kind of try to get over the feeling of feeling like shit and feeling like a failure. But losing my job was the nail in the coffin for me. That was the biggest. That was the last. How can I put? That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because I had lost my home, I'd gone bankrupt, I'd lost all these things, but at least I still had a decent paying job. Right, I had a job that I made good money. I didn't enjoy it, but at least I could pay my bills. I could support my family, and now that was gone. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do? In that, I also saw an opportunity, though, right? That's where that keeping your line in the water part comes into play. I saw an opportunity to start a business. I'd always wanted to be a business owner. Growing up, I saw myself as one of three things. I figured I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a businessman. I don't have the time or money to be a doctor right now. Don't have the time or money, nor the desire to be a lawyer right now. But businessman is still, at the time, still feasible, still is now. So I decided to play with that idea. I didn't know anything about owning a business. I didn't know what kind of business I wanted to own, but I said, here we go. Like, now, what better chance than to look into this than now? And this was during COVID too, which made finding another job really complicated. So what did I do? I put my line in the water. I started a business, and then I put it on Facebook, and then a coach reached out to me, and that built a relationship. And then one day I was driving to the grocery store, and an ad came on for Startup YMM, and that turned out to be an organization that helps entrepreneurs launch new businesses. And I signed up with them, and that led to new connections. And, next thing you know, it's starting to snowball. And here we are today. I'm tripping through transformation. I've got a great network of people. I'm working on men's mental health. I'm working towards becoming, a life and mindset coach, resiliency coach. I want to be a public speaker. And ultimately, I want to run or own a healing center. And then the big dream is to, help Elon Musk here ensure that the people we send to space have all the tools they need to have good mental health. You know, you don't want to send people on the space or another planet and they're depressed, they're anxious. They got to have their shit together. Like, you know, resources are limited out there. You can't be freaking out. So I would have never been on this path had I not lost all those things and then kept my line in the water. So I'm not at the end of my dream. You know, I'm still a long ways away from working with Elon, but I'm much further ahead than I would have been had I just given up and said, fuck it, my life is over. Again, pardon the language, but you know. So to sum it up, just no matter how bad things get, keep trying. Don't give up. That's all I can say for you guys today. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Adam, and I hope you took away some useful information from my segments. Again, I'm always trying to get better, improve things, you know, make myself a better host and make the show look and flow better and sound better. So thank you for supporting me. If you guys have any comments, suggestions, you can always comment on the video or send me, you know, a DM, an email, whatever. Just get in touch with me. I do not take criticism poorly. I want criticism. That's how I get better. So thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. And I appreciate you. Take care.